During a press conference held at the Manned Spacecraft Center on January 9, 1969, NASA formally announced the crew for the upcoming Apollo 11 mission. Following the successful Earth orbital and lunar orbital test flights of the lunar module during Apollos 9 and 10, if all went as planned, Apollo 11 would lift off from Cape Kennedy in July 1969 ahead of a landing on the Moon. Selected as commander for the historic mission was Neil Armstrong. Armstrong joined NASA in 1962. In 1965, he served as backup command pilot for Gemini 5. On his very first spaceflight on March 16, 1966, Armstrong lifted off aboard a Titan launch vehicle as command pilot of Gemini 8. During the mission, Armstrong piloted his spacecraft into a rendezvous with an orbiting Agena target vehicle. Then, 6.5 hours into the flight of Gemini 8.
Okay, Gemini 8, we have TM solid. You're looking good on the ground. Go ahead and dock.
Armstrong became the first person to perform a docking in space.
Flight, we are docked.
Though the docking was successful, soon Armstrong's spacecraft was spinning and tumbling out of control. As Flight Director Christopher Kraft remembered, it was clearly a life-threatening emergency in space, the worst we'd ever encountered. With the help of his crewmate Dave Scott, Armstrong managed to regain control of the spacecraft before either man could black out. The pair managed to splash down safely in the Pacific Ocean 10 hours and 41 minutes after liftoff. Before Project Gemini ended, Armstrong would again serve as a backup commander, this time for Gemini 11. He would serve in the role as backup commander once more in 1968 for the flight of Apollo 8, the first manned mission to travel to the Moon. Selected to join the astronaut corps in October 1963, Michael Collins was chosen to be Apollo 11's command module pilot. Following his assignment as backup pilot for Gemini 7, Collins flew aboard Gemini 10 on July 18, 1966 as mission pilot. During the 3-day mission, the crew of Gemini 10 set an altitude record flying 414 miles high. Also, Collins became the first person to perform 2 spacewalks on the same flight. He was originally selected to fly aboard Apollo 8 as command module pilot, but after being diagnosed with a cervical disc herniation, Collins was removed from the prime crew. The third member of the Apollo 11 crew was Buzz Aldrin, selected to be the mission's lunar module pilot. Selected by NASA as part of the third group of astronauts named in 1963, Aldrin had served as backup pilot for Gemini 9 before flying aboard Gemini 12 on November 11, 1966. During the Gemini 12 mission, Aldrin successfully completed 5.5 hours of extravehicular activity, finally demonstrating an astronaut's ability to work outside the spacecraft. With the crew now in place, preparation for the mission of Apollo 11 began in earnest. The primary objective of the Apollo 11 mission was to complete a lunar landing. The plan called for Apollo 11 to launch from Pad A of Launch Complex 39. The launch would place the crew and their spacecraft into a 115-mile-high parking orbit around Earth, during which the spacecraft's systems were to be checked out before the final decision to proceed to the Moon would be completed. If all went well, 2 hours after launch, the crew of Apollo 11 would then ignite the third stage engine of their vehicle for the 3-day trip to the Moon. Before launch, however, Armstrong and Aldrin completed nearly 2,600 hours of training, spent mostly inside the lunar module simulator, practicing the moon landing. Armstrong also spent 34 hours in the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle, or LLTV, simulating the landing and training Armstrong deemed necessary for the actual landing preparation. He and Aldrin also prepared for the planned lunar surface activities, which included training to collect geological samples and to set up lunar surface experiments. Meanwhile, Collins logged over 900 hours of training, half of which was spent inside the command module simulator.
Launch connect. Liftoff. We have liftoff.
4 months into the training of the crew of Apollo 11, the crew of Apollo 10 lifted off from Cape Kennedy in what was billed as a dress rehearsal for the flight of Apollo 11. By the time the crew of Apollo 10 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on May 26, 1969, they had successfully orbited the lunar module around the moon and successfully tested the vehicle's descent engine needed to land on the moon and ascent engine necessary to lift off the lunar surface. The achievements of Apollo 10 meant that Apollo 11 would for sure be the first landing mission to the moon. The only question was when. Even before the Apollo 10 mission was complete, the Saturn V that would lift the crew of Apollo 11 to the moon had already been rolled out to the launch pad. Then, on June 11, 1969, NASA announced that Apollo 11 would launch on July 16th, with the lunar landing set to take place 4 days later. As June became July, the crew continued their training. On July 11th, the 3 men had their final medical examinations. Then, on July 14th, just 2 days before their scheduled liftoff, the crew of Apollo 11 sat down for their final press appearance. Armstrong spoke first on behalf of the entire crew.
After a decade of planning and hard work, we're willing and ready to attempt to achieve our national goal. This is possible because very many Americans across the nation have dedicated themselves to quality, craftsmanship, and ingenuity. We're dependent, too, on the successes of the previous flights, the unmanned flights and the manned flights, Apollos 7, 8, 9, and 10, whose crews have done a magnificent job of preparing the way for us. I'm sure this American ingenuity and American craftsmanship has given us the best equipment that can be made available. And we're very happy to be ready to fly.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 2 hours, 40 minutes, 40 seconds, and counting. At this time, the prime crew for Apollo 11 has boarded the high-speed elevator from inside the A level in the mobile launcher, which is the second level inside the launcher. This is a high-speed elevator, 600 feet per minute, which will carry them to the 320-foot level, the spacecraft level. Shortly, we'll expect astronauts Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins to come across swing arm 9, the Apollo access arm, and proceed to the White Room and stand by to board the spacecraft. The third member of the crew, astronaut Edwin Aldrin, who will be the last one to board the spacecraft. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 1 hour, 20 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. All still go with the countdown for Apollo 11 at this time. At this point in the countdown, spacecraft commander Neil Armstrong once again appears to be the busiest worker in the spacecraft as he's performing a series of alignment checks associated with the guidance system in the spacecraft. He's working these checks with the spacecraft test conductor as the spacecraft test conductor reads out the various procedures and Armstrong responds to them. The astronauts aboard the spacecraft also were informed by the spacecraft conductor a short while ago that the launch vehicle is go at this time. The hydrogen problem that we did encounter earlier has been solved. That's real good news, said Armstrong, and then he went back to work shortly thereafter. We're now coming up on the 1 hour, 20-minute mark in the countdown. This is Kennedy Launch Control. T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds on the Apollo mission, the flight to land of the first men on the moon. All indications coming in to the control center at this time indicate we are go. 1 minute, 25 seconds and counting. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Roger, we got a roll program.
Tower clear.
Roger, roll. Complete and ascent program. One Bravo. Apollo 11 Houston, you're good at 1 minute.
Downrange 1 mile, altitude 4 miles now. Velocity 2,195 feet per second. We're through the region of maximum dynamic pressure now. Set 8 miles downrange, 12 miles high. Velocity 4,000 feet per second.
Stand by for mode 1 Charlie. Mark, mode 1 Charlie. 1 Charlie.
Cliff Charlesworth taking a staging status.
This is Houston, you are go for staging. Inboard cutoff.
Inboard engines out.
I'm inboard cutoff.
Downrange 35 miles, 30 miles high. Standing by for the outboard engine cut down now.
Station. And ignition.
Shut down right on time.
1.4 by 103.6.
Nearly 12 minutes after liftoff, Mike Collins radioed Houston to advise that Apollo 11 had achieved an orbit 101.4 nautical miles by 103.6 nautical miles.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are go for TLI, over. Apollo 11, thank you. Roger out.
Now nearly 2.5 hours since launch, the crew of Apollo 11 was given the go for TLI, Trans-Lunar Injection, the maneuver that would put the 3 men on a course for the moon.
This is Apollo Control. We're 10 minutes away from ignition and Trans-Lunar Injection. We want to add 10,435 feet per second to the spacecraft's velocity. Looking for a total velocity at the end of this burn about 35,575 feet per second. And we're a minute from ignition.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. Slightly less than 1 minute to ignition, and everything is go. Roger.
2 hours and 44 minutes since launch, Command Module pilot Mike Collins radioed Houston to advise the TLI burn had commenced.
Ignition. We confirm ignition, and the thrust is go. Apollo 11, this is Houston at 1 minute. Trajectory and guidance look good, and the stage is good, over. Apollo 11, roger. Apollo 11, this is Houston. Around 3.5 minutes. You're still looking good. Your predicted cutoff is right on the nominal. Roger, Apollo 11's go.
Cut off.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. We show cutoff.
We're showing velocity 35,570 feet per second, altitude 177 nautical miles.
Yeah, Houston, Apollo 11, that Saturn gave us a magnificent ride. Roger, 11, we'll pass that on, and it certainly looks like you're well on your way now.
Even as Commander Neil Armstrong passed along thanks for the performance of the Saturn V, Command Module pilot Mike Collins busied himself preparing for transposition and docking. The maneuvers were critical, for failure of either meant the crew would not have a vehicle to land on the moon. Collins would first separate the Command Service Module from the S-4B third stage of the Saturn V launch vehicle. Then he turned the spacecraft so that it was now facing the lunar module, safely stowed in its adapter within the S-4B stage. Collins gently applied translation thrusters to inch the Command Service Module closer and closer to the target lunar module. As he approached, Collins was actually viewing the lunar module from the top down. From here, he could see the lunar module's drogue, into which he was flying the command module's probe. At nearly 3.5 hours ground elapsed time, Neil Armstrong reported to Houston that the docking was a success.
And we understand that you are docked.
Apollo 11 was traveling toward the moon at over 21,000 feet per second, nearly 6,700 nautical miles from Earth.
It's Big Mike Collins there.
Well, you got a little bit of... Yeah, hello there, sports fans. You got a little bit of me, plus Neil's in the center couch, and Buzz is doing the camera work this time.
34 hours into the flight, the crew of Apollo 11 took to television for a tour of their spacecraft.
Is Buzz holding your cue cards for you, over?
Mike Collins described for viewers how the crew was settling into their home, now 129,000 nautical miles from Earth.
And competing with the professionals. We are very comfortable up here, though. We do have a happy home. There's plenty of room for the three of us, and I think we're all learning to find our favorite little corner to sit in. The zero G is very comfortable, but after a while you get to the point where you sort of get tired of rattling around and banging off the ceiling and the floor and the side, so you tend to find a little corner somewhere and put your knees up or something like that to wedge yourself in, and that seems more at home. Yeah, Neil's standing on his head again. He's trying to make me nervous.
He then shared with the television audience the unique experience of dining in space.
Well, looks like it's probably almost your dinner time down there, Earth. We'll show you our food cabinet here in a second.
11, roger. 11, Houston, we see a box full of goodies there, over.
Oh, we really have them, Charlie. We got all kinds of good stuff. We've got coffee up here in the upper left, and various breakfast items, bacon in little small bites, and beverages like fruit drink. And over in the center part, we have all kinds of things. Let me pull one out here and see what it is.
Right.
Would you believe you're looking at chicken stew here? All you have to do is 3 ounces of hot water for 5 or 10 minutes. Now we get our hot water out of a little spigot up here with a filter on it that filters any gases that may be in the drinking water out. And we just stick the end of this little tube in the end of the spigot and pull the trigger 3 times for 3 ounces of hot water, and then mush it up and slice the end off it, and there you go.
Right.
Next, Collins demonstrated the operation of the spacecraft's display keyboard, or DISCI, the device used by astronauts to interface with the command module's onboard computer.
We see a real display now.
Approximately 30 minutes since the television transmission began, Neil Armstrong radioed Houston to advise that the crew was signing off.
11, Houston, you copy, over?
Roger, we copy. And as we pan back out to the distance at which we see the Earth, we'll have Apollo 11 signing off.
Roger, Apollo 11. Thank you much for the show. It's a real good half hour. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Out.
This is Apollo Control at 34 hours, 46 minutes. Apollo 11 is presently 131,000 nautical miles from Earth, traveling at a speed of about 4,300 feet per second. During the next hour or so, the activity here in Mission Control will be revolving around getting the crew set up for their rest period and eat period. This will be a very long rest period tonight, scheduled 10 hours, and that will begin, according to the flight plan, at about 37 hours ground elapsed time. At 34 hours, 48 minutes, this is Apollo Control, Houston.
On day 3 of the mission, some 55 hours since liftoff, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin entered the lunar module for the first time to inspect and ready it for its upcoming lunar landing attempt. Both men relayed to Houston their observations of the lunar module as they first made entry.
The vehicle is surprisingly free of any debris floating around. It's very clean.
Roger.
There wasn't very much debris in the command module or the LEM. We found very few loose particles of bolts, nuts, and screws, and lint things. Very few in each spacecraft. They were very clean.
Roger. Sounds good. What do you estimate the temperature is, Buzz? Over.
Oh, I'd say maybe 73, 75.
Roger.
It's hard to tell at this density and pressure of gas, but comfort level is about the same as the command module. It's a little warmer or stuffier when we first got in, but it seems to be improving.
Houston copies out.
During the telecast, Aldrin showed viewers where he would later mount a camera to photograph Armstrong's historic descent down the lunar module's ladder toward the lunar surface.
I'm checking out this window bracket where I'll be putting it for the EVA pictures of Neil going down the ladder.
Roger.
That's about the position we'll be putting the camera in after the initial descent down the ladder. And it'll be taking 1 frame a second for most of the EVA.
Houston copies out. That's a real good view of that camera.
Aldrin continued with a familiarization tour of the LEM's cabin.
Okay, for those of you that don't know, this is where we log most of our data for each of the LEM maneuvers. And we have another card like this. It's the timeline book that we place down on the table in front of the data and display keyboard. And it's on this timeline that we have all our procedures. And we obviously have to hold these in place in 0G, so we make use of the Velcro patches on the back and on the table. So we can attach these down here. And then we just turn the pages over when we go to new sequences in our timeline of procedures.
Roger.
And we're ready to copy DOI pad.
Right, we'll have the photos work that one up for you momentarily.
We're giving you a picture now of the floor of the cabin. I think you can see the one of the 2 portable life support systems backpacks here in the center. And on each side we have the 2 helmet visors. I'll remove one of them and show you a little closer view of what this looks like.
Roger.
Inside the helmet visors are the EVA gloves with the blue tips. I'll not take those out now.
Roger, Buzz, that's a great shot now that we're getting of the helmet, the EVA visor, and also the EVA gloves in the background.
Okay, you did say this was going out now, didn't you?
Stand by, I think so. 11, you got a pretty big audience. It's live in the U.S., it's going live to Japan, Western Europe, and much of South America. Everybody reports very good color. Appreciate the great show.
Nearly 1 hour and 40 minutes after it began, the crew of Apollo 11 concluded the telecast. But before signing off, Commander Armstrong, himself an Eagle Scout, passed along special greetings to a large gathering back on Earth.
That's the Earth, and we have a very good view of it today. There are a few more cloud bands on than yesterday when we beamed down to you, but it's a beautiful sight. And Charlie, I'd like to say hello to all my fellow scouts and scouters at Farragut State Park in Idaho. They're having a national jamboree there this week, and Apollo 11 would like to send them best wishes.
Thank you, Apollo 11. I'm sure that if they didn't hear that, they will get the word through the news. Certainly appreciate that.
During the television broadcast, the crew had advanced another 2,000 nautical miles toward the moon, placing them some 178,000 nautical miles from Earth.
This is Apollo Control at 75 hours 26 minutes. We're 15 minutes away from loss of signal. Apollo 11 is 966 miles from the moon. Velocity 6,511 feet per second. We're 23 minutes away from the LOI burn.
LOI, or Lunar Orbit Insertion, was the burn maneuver that would slow the spacecraft to a velocity enabling it to enter lunar orbit. The critical burn would happen while Apollo 11 was on the far side of the moon, flying in the blind without the ability to communicate voice or telemetry back to Houston.
Flight Director Cliff Charlesworth polling the flight controllers for the go, no-go status for LOI now.
Apollo 11, this is Houston, over.
Roger, go ahead, Houston, Apollo 11.
11, this is Houston. You are go for LOI, over.
Roger, go for LOI.
We're 3 minutes away from loss of signal. Apollo 11 is 425 nautical miles from the moon. Velocity 7,368 feet per second. Weight 96,012 pounds.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. All your systems are looking good going around the corner. We'll see you on the other side, over.
Roger. Everything looks okay up here.
Roger, out.
And we've had loss of signal as Apollo 11 goes behind the moon. We were showing a distance to the moon of 309 nautical miles at LOS. Velocity 7,664 feet per second. Weight was 96,012 pounds. We're 7 minutes, 45 seconds away from the LOI number 1 burn, which will take place behind the moon, out of communications.
Madrid AOS. Madrid AOS. Reading you loud and clear, Houston, LOS.
Roger, reading you the same now. Could you repeat your burn status report?
It was like perfect.
Nearly 35 minutes after falling into radio silence, Apollo 11 emerged from behind the moon. The 3 men were in an orbit 61.6 nautical miles by 169.5 nautical miles. As the crew swept over their future landing approach for the first time, Neil Armstrong described the view from 127 miles above the moon.
Apollo 11 is getting its first view of the landing approach. Looks very much like the pictures, but like the difference between watching a real football game and one on TV. No substitute for actually being here. We're going over the Messier series of craters right at time, looking vertically down on them. And Messier A, we can see good-sized blocks in the bottom of the crater. I don't know what our altitude is now, but that indicates those are pretty good-sized blocks.
Now almost 5 hours since entering lunar orbit, Armstrong and Aldrin readied themselves to leave the command module Columbia for entry into the lunar module they named Eagle.
Hello, Apollo 11, Houston. We're wondering if you started into the LIM yet, over.
We have the CSM hatch out, the drogue and probe removed and stowed, and we're just about ready to open the LIM hatch now.
Roger, thank you much, Neil. We'll be standing by.
Okay, Charlie, we're in the LIM. The docking index mark is the same.
Roger, we copy.
You heard that report from Neil Armstrong. They're now in the lunar module.
During this time Armstrong and Aldrin were aboard Eagle, the pair continued to test and monitor systems ahead of the undocking of the lunar module from the command module, set to take place some 100 hours, 20 minutes ground elapsed time.
This is Apollo Control at 100 hours, 14 minutes. We're now less than 2 minutes from reacquiring the spacecraft on the 13th revolution. When next we hear from them, the lunar module should be undocked from the command and service module. We're presently about 25 minutes away from the separation burn, which will be performed by Mike Collins in the command module to give the LEM and the CSM a separation distance at the descent orbit insertion maneuver of about 2 miles.
Hello, Eagle, Houston, we're standing by, over.
I believe that this nation should commit itself.
Eagle, Houston, we see you on the steerable, over.
To achieving the goal.
Roger, Eagle, undock.
Before this decade is out.
Roger, how does it look?
Of landing a man on the moon.
Eagle has wings.
Roger.
And returning him safely to the Earth.
Now, some 2 hours after undocking, Armstrong and Aldrin waited for clearance to land.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for landing. Retro.
Go.
Vital.
Go.
Guidance.
Go.
Control.
Go.
Telcom.
Go.
GNC.
Go.
Econ.
Go.
Insurgent.
Go.
Capcom, we're go for landing.
Eagle, Houston, you're go for landing, over.
Roger, understand. Go for landing. 3,000 feet. Stop alarm. 1201. 1201.
Roger, 1201.
1201 alarm.
Same type, we're go, flight.
Okay, we're go.
We're go, same type, we're go.
Flight Fighter right on, real good.
2,000 feet. 2,000 feet. Into the ag, 47 degrees.
Roger.
47
How's our
degrees.
margin looking, Bob?
It looks okay. We're
Okay.
about 4.5.
Roger.
There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet.
40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust.
Its hazards are hostile to us all.
Great shadow.
Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind.
30 seconds.
Forward, just.
And its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again.
Back light.
But why, some say, the moon?
Okay, engine stop.
Why choose this as our goal?
ATA at a descent.
And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain?
Mode control, both auto, descent engine command override off.
Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic?
Engine arm off.
Why does Rice play Texas?
413 is in.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon.
We copy you down, Eagle.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Because that goal
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
At the foot of the ladder,
Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept.
the LEM footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches.
One we are unwilling to postpone,
I'm going to step off the LEM now.
and one we intend to win, and the others too.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Apollo 11, this is Hornet, over. This is Apollo 11, reading you loud and clear. Our position 1330, 16915.
Hornet reports spacecraft right on target point.
When Neil Armstrong first stepped foot upon the moon, it had been 109 hours, 24 minutes, and 23 seconds since the flight of Apollo 11 commenced. Just over 8 years since President John F. Kennedy set as a national goal landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth, and 195 hours, 18 minutes, and 35 seconds since the flight began, the crew of Apollo 11 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean within view of their recovery vessel USS Hornet, thus achieving the goal and completing one of man's greatest adventures.